marvelous new Europe because Aznar took his orders from Crawford, Texas, with the support of 2% of the population. In March 2004, an election came along, and Aznar was voted out. And Spain was bitterly denounced for appeasing terrorism. What was the position of the new government? Well, the position of the new government was that Spain should not have troops in Iraq unless they're under UN authorization, which happens to be the position of about 75% of Americans at the same time. But there's a difference between Spain and the United States. In Spain, people know what public opinion is. In the United States, it takes an individual research project to determine what it is because it wasn't reported. Furthermore, in Spain, they could vote on it, not in the United States. Neither political party would touch such an opinion, and that's why Spain was denounced, because voters took the same position as the large majority of the American public. Well, that tells us something, too. I couldn't find any comment on that. There seems to be something paradoxical about all of this. The facts of the matter, of which this are a sample, seem to conflict with the grand contemporary theme, namely that the mission of the United States is what's called democracy promotion. In particular, what the liberal press calls the president's messianic vision to bring democracy to Iraq. That's a vision that suddenly surfaced as the reason for the war, after all the other pretexts for the invasion have disappeared, but people were polite enough, commentators polite enough not to notice that. And in fact, there was near unanimous awe for the president's messianic vision. Critics said, well, maybe it's noble and inspiring, but maybe we can't carry it off because of their cultural failings and so on and so forth. Actually, there was one sector of opinion, I should say, that didn't agree with this, the only one I could find, namely Iraqis. At about the same time that the president announced his messianic vision with enormous awe and acclaim, I couldn't find a word here questioning that this was the reason for the invasion after it was announced. Right at the same time, this is last November a year ago, the Washington Post did report a poll taken in Baghdad where people were asked what they thought the reason for the U.S. invasion was. And some agreed with 100% of articulate opinion here that it was to bring democracy to Iraq. 1%. 5% thought that the goal was to help Iraqis. The rest said the unspeakable here, that the goal was to take control of Iraq's resources and reorganize the region in the U.S. interests, the large majority. Iraqis did agree with American commentators in seeing a cultural problem, but they didn't see it in Iraq. They saw it here. It's a cultural problem here where people are willing to believe the word of their dear leader without any other evidence, and that is a problem. They're right about that. Actually, Iraqi opinions were somewhat more nuanced. The same poll showed that although 1% thought that the goal of the invasion was to bring democracy, about half said the United States want democracy in Iraq, but the U.S. will make sure that it will influence and determine its course. And that's correct. That's what democracy means. Democracy means you can have elections, you can do anything you like, but you better do what we say. Iraqis apparently understand that, and we choose not to. And the word choose has to be emphasized because there's plenty of evidence. Well, let's go back to democracy promotion, the great contemporary theme. That's led to a huge literature. There's a whole cadre of scholarly experts now on democracy promotion. The most renowned of them is Thomas Carruthers. He's the director of the Democracy and Rule of Law project at Carnegie Institution, many books and articles. He's highly supportive of this leading theme of U.S. foreign policy since Reagan. He just published a new book in which he reviews the achievements of the last 25 years of democracy promotion since Reagan. And intelligent man, he finds what he calls a strong line of continuity in all administrations. Namely, they're all schizophrenic. They all have split personalities, in his words, which is a very strange phenomenon. I'll give you his description of it. Where supporting democracy was consistent with U.S. economic and security interests, the U.S. stands up for democracy. Where democracy clashes with economic and security interests, democracy is downplayed and ignored, and the U.S. supports dictators and torturers. So democracy is fine, but as long as you follow orders. Same principle as always. Actually, the interesting, it's getting late, so I won't give more examples, but I can't bear not reporting the way this is described in the business press the last few days with regard to Iraq. Now, the Wall Street Journal yesterday has an article by their Iraqi specialist which says the following: in Baghdad, the men likely to lead Iraq's next government promise to demand withdrawal as soon as they take power after Sunday's election. Then it says, problem in the United States. Here's the way we respond. President Bush and his aides refuse to be pinned down to such a plan. Here comes Condoleezza Rice. I'm really reluctant to try to put a timetable on that because I think the goal is to get the mission accomplished. The mission is to establish democracy by rejecting the demand of the elected leaders. And then it goes on to explain that they hope they'll be able to pressure the democratically elected government to accept a compromise in which they will accept vague promises to withdraw rather than a firm timeline. Well, Tony Blair chimed in today in the London Financial Times with a long interview, also full of the great mission of bringing democracy, and he says, there is no way that the United States and the UK will set a timetable for the withdrawal of their troops from Iraq. A deadline is not being contemplated because we must stay the course to bring them democracy. Somehow this is all done with a straight face. Don't ask me how, but it's pretty impressive. Well, final comment. The last election did lead to a lot of hopelessness here, but it's important to bear in mind that the election told us essentially nothing about the country, just as we would have learned nothing about the country if there had been a slight shift in voting patterns, if the Democratic imagery had been a little more effective, and it had given Kerry 31% of the electorate instead of giving Bush 31%. We would still have learned nothing. The reason is that there was no election in any sense of the term that is worth taking seriously. The political system, including elections, is carefully managed to prevent the threat of democracy. The actual views, and that's very clear from the suppressed information that came out about people's actual views. If you take a look at those actual views, the actual views of the public, who are of course excluded from the system, they provide a pretty respectable agenda for carrying forward the task of making the United States a more responsible global partner. What's needed is to create, in part to recreate, a functioning democratic society in which an informed public can participate in formation and implementation of policy, domestic and international, in the political sphere and the economic sphere as well. Well, that's hardly a very utopian ideal, and it's not an unmanageable task. If we fail to undertake it successfully, we don't have anyone to blame but ourselves for what will ensue, which may turn out to be very grim.